And here we are making them. Hey, what's up? It's Jeff. The sun is rising, and so it's time to do another episode of Good Morning Frumess. Good morning, everybody. I'm kind of really tired right now. I'm not gonna lie. At this time, I wake up at 4 o'clock. I wake up 4 o'clock in the morning on Tuesday. It's Tuesday morning for me. I know it's Monday night for you. I wake up at 4 a.m. and I figure, well, it's great time to do a sunrise show. We're gonna launch right into it. Let's talk about some Batman. Oh boy, Batman is my favorite comic book character, maybe of all time. I mean, my affinity to Batman goes back to the year 1988, definitely 1989. It was like that was my first thing. That was my first superhero. I was familiar obviously with Batman 66 on TV, Adam West, but I was just coming into consciousness as Batman was taking the world by storm in 1989. I'm born in 1980, late 1985, right? But I remember going to the drugstore and with my mom, and she would buy me the packs, with the gum you're not supposed to eat because it's stale. It'll crack open all your teeth. She'd buy me like the Topps Batman 1989 collectible cards, and uh, you know, that was my first. That was like the exposure part of the partial exposure. It wasn't my first film in the theater, as far as I know. I don't think I saw it in the theater. Maybe I did. I don't know. I can't remember. I think I had to have. I gotta check with mom and dad about that one because I remember my first film being Space Invaders. What's going on, Riot Gear? How you doing? Welcome to the show, Mr. Red. Welcome to you as well. Hope you guys are having a wonderful evening or morning, depending on where you are. But yeah, Batman was like, oh my God, it was everything. It was absolutely everything. And at the time, that was like I was too young at the time to have this, to recognize this observation amongst pop culture. But at the time, this was like cutting edge for Batman because everybody at that time, the only live action Batman that they had was Adam West from the Batman 66 series. See, here's the thing about Batman that we all need to understand. He's not just a comic book character, he's a literary character. He's a character of literature. And just like Sherlock Holmes, just like Moses in the Torah or the Bible. Yeah, I went there. You know, uh, and he's open to interpretation. People interpret Batman. There's a few, and I've spoken about it in the past with my friend Bob Rose. There's a few core concepts that you need for Batman to remain being Batman, but you can pretty much go anywhere with the character as long as you dress him up as a bat. At the end of the day, you literally can go anywhere with the character. And we've seen it. We've seen it time and again. But at this time, this was the first time that Batman on the comic book page was really being brought to life. There's, I would say, but going back to, we were just talking about Torah for a second. The Bible, you have BC and AD, right? Like it's this big divider, before Christ and after dead or something, however it works. Well, for Batman, I would say that year would be 1986 when Frank Miller came out with The Dark Knight Returns, because that's the moment when Batman kind of becomes the immortalized as the modern Batman. See, we could go back to the 70s actually with Dennis O'Neil, I believe his name is, and some other guys. They were kind of bringing Batman back to a darker tone. It started in the 70s. We can't give Frank Miller all of the credit, but the big dividing line is by far The Dark Knight Returns. That's what changes the game. Batman starts in 1930, 1939 or 1930s? No, 1939. Detective Comics, longest running comic book in the United States, Detective Comics. Batman starts in 1939, and he is way more detective than he is superhero. He is a dude who is a millionaire, and he dresses up like a bat, and he is a detective, and he solves mysteries that involve, supernatural things. He carries gas pellets in a belt. He's got a gun. Yeah, Batman used to use a gun. Way back when. The original character, the Bob Kane character, used a gun. Now, people often credit Batman's creation to just Bob Kane, but that's just not true. Bob Kane is only half of the puzzle. The other credit, and there's a documentary about this recently, which I have not watched yet, but I really want to. The other credit really needs to go to a man named Bill Finger. Bill Finger was Bob Kane's sort of partner in crime. Bob Kane was more of an illustrator than he was a writer, and Bill Finger was more of a writer than he was an illustrator. I could be wrong about that, but I think I got it right. Bill Finger created all the stuff we know about Batman. Like Bob Kane wrote the Batman, and his original version of Batman doesn't even look like Batman. But it's Bill Finger who really fleshes out the mythology and sort of brings Batman to what he is or what he is known for in the comics, and that all sort of happens in that early detective comic period. So and then Batman explodes from that point on. In 1940, he gets a sidekick, Robin. Then in the 50s, it's like all the fads start, right? Like in the 50s, Batman's fighting all sorts of weird monsters. Like things get really friggin' weird. He starts wearing zebra print suits, bat suits, pink, purple, yellow, green bat suits. He's fighting crazy monsters. He's fighting villains like Crazy Quilts. Things get even weirder in the 60s. It just keeps going on and on. Just the zaniness of Batman. Chris brought up, what did Chris is in the comments. What's up, Chris? Chris brought up Batmite. Batmite comes into the picture. I think Batmite is the same as Mr. Mxyzptlk or whatever his name is, the Superman's nemesis, the guy from the sixth dimension. I think Batmite is also from the sixth dimension. And yes, you are right. He did have a cameo. Chris says Bob Kane had a cameo at the beginning of the film. This is true. But the mythology just starts to really get out of control, and this is heightened by what's happening in the city in the 60s. We've spoken about this in the Beatles episodes. The three B's of the 1960s, right? You have the three B's. What are the three B's of pop culture? Bond, Beatles, and Batman. And the Batman in reference is Batman 66, Batman 1966, a TV show, live action TV show. I forget who put that on. Ran for 3 seasons, 120 episodes in 3 seasons. And it was kind of, in a way, it was kind of like the Tales from the Crypt of the 60s, in that everybody who was anybody would stunt cameo on this Batman series, starring Adam West and Burt Ward as Robin. Adam West is Batman, Burt Ward is Robin. And there are some things that we get there are some aspects from the Batman 66, which is really just an extension of the craziness of the comics at the time, which was really, really popular. But there's some of that stuff still carries over today. A lot of the camp, a lot of the goofy aspects that you'll see pop its head up from time to time is from that period. And then, of course, like anything, that's on a parabolic evolution, when you get to round, what do you go to? Square. When you get to square, what do you go to? Round. It was the same thing with bell-bottom jeans. Remember that? Bell-bottoms. You got bell-bottoms are cool in the 60s and 70s, and then it becomes all about straight, tight jeans. And then in the 90s, all of a sudden, all the girls, I remember all the girls in my school, they all started wearing bell-bottoms again. It was cool. and baggy pants. It was cool to wear baggy pants, and now it's cool to wear tight jeans against skinny jeans. It's like this. It's like this inflating, deflating concept. It's the same thing with Batman. It goes from being super serious and super. I mean, Batman's killing people with his gun, right? Super serious to suddenly a goofy Batman that has all sorts of crazy gadgets and lives with his butler, and he has a bat dog, Ace the Bat Hound, and just goofiness galore. And then all of a sudden it gets super serious again. Dick Grayson goes off to become Nightwing. He recruits a new guy, Jason Todd, because he catches him trying to steal the wheels off of the Batmobile. And the 70s come and things just get dark. He goes back to being the world's greatest detective. But now here's the difference. We were talked about before, he was more of a detective than he was a superhero. And now in the 70s, he's more of a superhero than, say, a detective. But that's not even really a good statement to make, because that's the thing about Batman. That's a huge core concept of Batman as a character, is that he's always a detective. He's the world's greatest detective. That's the point. He is, and that's something that they always sort of seem to neglect in the movies. Many of the movies, not all the movies, but some of the movies really neglect. I think Christopher Nolan's Batman movies really neglect this aspect of Batman, that he's a detective, that he's a detective first. That's why I've always said, and people laugh in my face. One day we're going to do a big deep dive on this, but I will throw down all of my money and say that Batman Forever is probably the best live action Batman film. Like, as a singular Batman film, live action Batman film effort, it is going to be Batman Forever, like 150%. I have so many reasons to back that up, but I'm not going to get into them right now. I love Batman. I love Batman Returns, and I love Batman and Robin. See, that's the thing. Going back to the thing about like iterations, every single adaptation about Batman, whether you personally love or hate it, is valid, because all it is just an adaptation that focuses on certain aspects of Batman's character. And people get, their pants all tied up in a knot about it. Oh, that's not really Batman. That's not, we're purists. Like, our Batman has to perfectly represent what we love about the character. And if it's not true to that, then we riot and go, crazy and get upset and yada, yada, yada. Slashman says that producer Michael Olson said, Uslan said that the upcoming Batman will deliver on the detective skills. That's great. That's great. I'm glad to hear that. Slash also says, love the Schumacher love. Fun fact, he was the only director that was actually a Batman fan beforehand. And it shows. And it really shows. And people got really bent out of shape because he put nipples on the bat suit. And I'll be honest with you guys, I think that's nothing more than just homophobia, man. Like, that's just 90s. That's just a byproduct of like 90s homophobia. Just like what? Who gives a shit if there are nipples on the bat suit? Why does that matter? Why does that matter? It's like Schumacher's coming from a place of like looking at like, Roman breastplates. Batman is, as much of a detective as he is, he's also a warrior fighting a one-man war on crime, trying to make himself look beyond human, even though he's just a human. Another huge part of his character. And he exhibits that in certain, that comes out in like hubris, in the sense that he thinks that he alone can stop all crime in Gotham. That's his craziness too. There's all these different, and so he's making himself seem more than human, playing into the myth. He's wearing these breastplates with nipples on. So fucking what? So what? Oh, he's got nipples on the bat suit. That's really gay. You know what I mean? Like, it just sounds so stupid. I never bought into that. I never bought into that. I always thought that was lame. Like, so what? Who cares if there's nipples on the bat suit? All of it is valid, man. All of it is valid. Even in Batman and Robin, people hate Batman and Robin. I love me some Batman and Robin, because you want to know something? Batman and Robin is just a movie adaptation of Batman 66. If you look at Adam West's Batman, which a lot of people love, but then you say, hey, what do you think about Batman and Robin? They go, oh, terrible, because like, it's like the cool thing to do. It's the equivalent of like the Misfits fan that's like, we're talking about this in the group a lot. It's like the Misfits fan that's like, oh, I see you wearing a Misfits shirt. Well, name three songs. Or, oh, you're wearing a Ramones shirt. Name three songs. It's like that stupid elitist fandom bullshit, man. Yeah, Batman and Robin is really great as a deliciously campy, like goofy adaptation of Batman. The first 15 minutes of Batman and Robin is so action packed. You can't take your eyeballs off the screen. Go, rewatch it right now and tell me I'm wrong. I'm not wrong. It's phenomenal. It's a phenomenal film. And the same thing with Batman Forever. I love those Warner Brothers movies. I think they were great. They were great, especially in hindsight. And yes, I went through my period where I was like, no, 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 like none of this really. When I was like deep in my comic book reading phase, I've read Batman for years and years and years. I read comic book runs of Batman starting in Nightfall from 1992 all the way up to Batman RIP in 2009. So I've read 20 years of Batman modern comic book history, straight. So I really feel like I really understand Batman, at least the modern version of Batman. And I went through my period where it was like, none of these are really, truly Batman. But I never once bought into those Nolan films. That's another story for another time. We're here to talk about Batman, the original Batman. So the reason why I'm talking about how every interpretation is valid and how Batman's a literary character to be adapted, that's how we have to look today. When we look, we always talk about context. When are we looking? Are we looking at this within the context of what year? Are we looking at it from when it was created? Are we looking at it 10 years after it was created? Or are we looking at it 20 years after it was created? Because fandoms change and our understanding of artwork, of these pieces of art, of this media changes along with that. And so you have when Batman 89, which by the way is now getting its own comic book series as well. When Batman 89 first came out, you had everybody was like, "Oh my god, it's like the perfect Batman. They nailed it. They nailed the dark tone that I've been reading in my comic books. It's friggin' awesome, man." Oh, like everybody was super stoked. Batman did $400 million worldwide at the box office, which is unheard of. I think to this day, it is the top it's in the top 5 biggest grossing films of all time from when they first came out. Like that was a huge movie. The summer of 1989 is the summer of Batman, truly, right? And everything it was everywhere. I remember I remember like as I'm coming into consciousness and playing with these toys, and Tim Burton's an interesting character. Tim Burton comes into the picture. He was signed on to do Batman in 1986. So a full 3 years before they released the film. He had only directed one movie. He had done Pee-wee's Big Adventure in 1986, and he had done a short film, Frankenweenie and Vincent, and he worked for Disney. And they were still not sure about Tim Burton's abilities. And then he did Beetlejuice. And when he did Beetlejuice, everything changed because Beetlejuice was a smashing success. Beetlejuice, 1988, comedy, dark comedy, I guess you would call it. Super original, unique film when you think about it. And that's what Tim Burton really does better than anything else. Because Tim Burton is an interesting cat. He's like, especially with like his later films, it's all about style over substance. Like story takes a back seat to style. How does everything look? Production design, wardrobe, stuff like that. Big sensational scenes. You know what I mean? For the trailer. All story and character sort of take a back seat to those things. However, the rule of thumb with Tim Burton, especially early Tim Burton, generally speaking, is if it's an original idea by Tim Burton, it's going to be knock out of the park, flawless in every single aspect. And if it's an adaptation of something, it's going to be, I don't want to say flawed. Flawed is not the right word, and that's not a nice word, I think, to Tim Burton. I love Tim Burton. I think I've seen every single Tim Burton film there is to see. Maybe except Dumbo. I don't think I saw Dumbo. What's the better way to put it? it's not flawed, but if it's something that he's adapting, story story takes a backseat to style. That's the truth. That's the truth. And if it's something original, the story and the style is going to be there. And a prime example of that is both Beetlejuice and Edward Scissorhands, two incredibly unique, original, quirky films, brilliant masterpieces by Tim Burton. Batman and Batman Returns are brilliant masterpieces by Tim Burton as well. However, they are both, I'm going to just say it, they're flawed. They're flawed films. That's the best word to use. They're flawed. Hold on, let's look at the comments real quick. Slashman says Bob Kane couldn't be in the film because he was sick. Right, he was. However, that is his artwork. Yes, his artwork is featured of a Batman, I believe. It says Bob Kane on it. But Bob Kane was very pleased with the Batman that that Tim Burton put out, and he passed away in the middle of all that Batmania, I believe. Well, it doesn't take a detective to know who knocked up the cat. Yeah, I'm not, I know that Batman and Catwoman are married now in comics. I have not followed comics recently for many years because it's too expensive. And when I started to become a filmmaker, the money that I would spend on comic books instead was diverted towards equipment and things, and I just I relocated resources in that kind of way. So I'm not in touch with, I mean, I know some things, but I'm not really in touch. Slash says, I think Batman and Robin isn't directly linked to the 60s show, but they both drew from the same source material, the Silver Age comics of the 50s and 60s. And I would say it's not direct, Slashman. It's not direct, but it's absolutely there. It's absolutely there. The tone, if you don't think that Joel Schumacher in the 90s wasn't thinking about Batman 66 when they said, hey, we want you to go lighter with this stuff, it's too dark, we want you to go back to the lighter side of things, of course he went back and he must have looked at that source material. And it's a shame we never got that fifth Batman movie, because I would have loved to have seen Nicolas Cage as the Scarecrow. That would have been really weird and wild and interesting. Speaking of which, Nicolas Cage was going to be working with Tim Burton to do Superman, which would have been awesome as well, Thanks. I wasn't sure about Burton shot at Broadner's, the bar I drank at, blah, blah, blah. My favorite line is, hey, Batman, what killed the dinosaurs? That's Arnold Schwarzenegger's line in Batman and Robin. It is great. So yeah, right. We're talking about Tim Burton. Sorry, getting sidetracked with these comments. So Tim Burton is sort of he can be very flawed. He can be very flawed with his films when it's not his own personal source material, is basically what I'm trying to say. I agree with that, Slash. People forget that Schumacher was picked by Burton himself. Well, that I didn't know. But Forever was pretty much in Burton's style before studio revisions. So there you go. There you go. Sorry. Where were we? Okay, Batman 89. Batman, sorry, try to keep this all on. We got to keep on the train, Jeff. Keep on the train. So Batman 89 comes out, and today, so how was it received back then versus how it's received today? Back then, well, there was I feel like there's three perspectives on Batman 89. There's when it first came out, where everybody's like, they nailed it on the head, it's perfect, blah, blah, blah. We got Walter White coming in from New Zealand. What's going on, Walter? Glad you're here. We got people in 1989 are like, this is the perfect adaptation of Batman. It's just like Frank Miller's comic, The Dark Knight Returns. I love it, blah, blah, blah. And then as the 90s go on, as people's understanding of modern Batman gets more informed by what's going on in comics, everybody's and something happens. Kevin Smith and Tim Burton, who almost collaborated together on the Superman Lives thing, because Kevin Smith wrote the script and Tim Burton was going to direct, and we just said that Nicolas Cage was going to star. Kevin Smith kind of burns Tim Burton when he does, he does this live spoken word performance thing. And one of his first stories, when he first started doing it, that really sort of put him on the map with this sort of storytelling. He would tell these behind the Hollywood stories. He's a very candid sort of guy, which is what I love about Kevin Smith. And he talks about how Tim Burton admits that he's never read a comic, and that really sort of echoed with a lot of fandom at that time, where they started to sort of really, and that's Smith sort of jabbing back at Burton, who said some disparaging things about Kevin Smith. And then here's Kevin Smith talking about how Tim Burton admits to having never read a comic, which makes everybody sort of like rethink and recalibrate what Batman 89 is, and started going, oh no, this is all wrong. This is all wrong. And if you read Batman comic books and then you watch Batman, you're going to see some stuff, and we're going to talk about it in a minute. 10 things. That's the whole point of this show, right? We're going to talk about that in a second. But it is vastly different. It really deviates from a lot of the core concepts in the same way that Nolan's Batman deviates from a lot of the core concepts. I'll tell you, I was watching The Dark Knight, and in the middle of watching The Dark Knight in 2008, a film that I almost worked on as a production assistant, because I was right there when they were shooting it in school. It was the moment where Bruce Wayne says, I'm going to stop being Batman. And it was in that moment, along with a few other moments, where I said, nope, fuck this movie. That's not Batman. Batman would never say something like that. And that's what I mean by like these core concepts, because one of the core concepts of Batman is that Batman is always going to be Batman. It's much like the core concept of Spider-Man, which I love. I love this. My friend Nathan came up with this, or he didn't come up with it, but he brought this to my attention. The way to really nail Peter Parker and Spider-Man is as follows. Everything that Peter Parker wants is the opposite of everything that Spider-Man wants. Whatever Spider-Man wants always ends up harming whatever Peter Parker wants, and whatever Peter Parker wants always ends up harming whatever Spider-Man wants. But Peter Parker, and what makes him a hero, what makes him like truly worthy of this power that is a great responsibility. With great power comes great responsibility, is that he will always choose what Spider-Man needs to do over what Peter Parker needs to do. And it always ends up hurting Peter Parker's social life in some way, shape, or form. And to a much sort of a similar layer of that lies in Batman. Batman's core concept is that when his parents were shot and killed, the real Bruce Wayne is Batman. Batman is Bruce Wayne. Bruce Wayne is really more of the secret identity, just like with Clark Kent and Superman. Clark Kent is actually the secret identity of Superman. Kal-El is the person. Clark Kent is the identity. Bruce Wayne, even though he was born as Bruce Wayne is the secret identity. Batman is the real guy. You know what I mean? Bruce Wayne can never have anything like deeper than whatever superficial connections he has with people, because his entire life is devoted to being Batman entirely, because he's waging a one-man war on crime. And that's why The Dark Knight Returns was such a revolutionary idea. It was such a revolutionary notion that this man is rising above just his one-man war on crime, and he's literally taking on a god. They explore this greatly in Dawn of Justice, Batman versus Superman, the Zack Snyder film, which takes heavily from The Dark Knight Returns, way more so, in my opinion, than Batman 89. But it's this idea that just rocked people to the core, where it's like, yo, Superman, he's a god. He's not just a person. He's not just an alien. He's not just a super being. He's a god. And Batman is just a man. And man, who's so angry with God, is going to take him on with his technology and try and beat him. And that's what happens at the end. Spoilers. You should read it. It's a great book. So that's like at the core concept of Batman. And they totally got that wrong in The Dark Knight. And I was just like, I was so turned off. And in a similar way, we were talking about how people react to Batman 89 in a similar way. People started to reject Batman 89 because it's missing a lot of these core concepts, mainly that Batman doesn't kill people. This is a huge, huge thing. To Batman, all life is sacred and precious. And in order for him to be the line that he draws in the sand that separates him from the real crazies, because he wears a mask just like they do. But what separates him from the people that he fights is that he doesn't kill. You know what I mean? It's like this defining thing that reminds him that he's not as insane as the rest of the guys he's going up against, you know? And that sort of goes by the wayside in Batman 89. But then people will go back and be like, well, actually, and then this is, I think, the modern understanding of Batman 89. People are just like, well, if you look at the 1939 comic book, Batman 89 is a sort of a somewhat faithful adaptation in a way of the original Batman from 1939. You know, that's how you have to think about it. In the same way that if you think about Batman and Robin as Batman 66, it's easy to understand why that movie is what it is. That's how I look at Batman and Batman Returns to an extent. It's this early Batman who is killing people. He's not using a gun in Batman 89, but, you know, and that's something that Nolan did correct. He did the whole story of why Batman doesn't use a gun, which I thought was great. Slash here says, Burton definitely read comics in preparation for the films. Again, Michael Oslin actually gave him some essential issues. Okay, so I didn't know that. I mean, he's been quoted as saying, anybody who knows me knows I've never read a comic book in my life. And even if he read comics in preparation for the films, that doesn't make him a comic book lover or a comic book reader or, studying of the source material. When you hear Tim Burton, and we're going to launch into our list in a minute, when you hear Tim Burton talk about Batman, he has such a superficial understanding of Batman. He goes, yeah, Batman's about the duality of dark and light. Like that's literally all he ever says in interviews. You watch the making of on the discs, and that's what he's talking about, right? The good and the dark and the light. There's duality. It's this man who wears a mask and he's got duality. He just loves the word duality, focuses on it. And Batman is not there's no duality to Batman. That's what I'm saying. Like, there's no duality. Batman is Batman. Bruce Wayne, like Clark Kent, is the mask. You know what I mean? Everybody knows this. This is like a huge thing. But at the same time, there's really three aspects. There's Batman. There's Bruce Wayne, the detective Bruce Wayne, like the Bruce Wayne when he's not wearing the Batman mask. And then there's, sort of like flaky, phony, superficial Bruce Wayne, aloof, yada, yada, yada. And that's another thing that I will give to Nolan. He tried his best to sort of create the duality, if you will, of Bruce Wayne. Like, you have these two different versions of Bruce Wayne, which you don't see as much in Michael Keaton. But let's launch into the list, because we have a list here. I love Screen Rant. They always do these very interesting things that I can just like latch onto and then sort of expand on and pull on like taffy. If you like this content, if this is your first time with us, please make sure, take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to this video, or subscribe to this channel, because we do stuff like this all the time. Okay, we're going into it. So here we go. Boom. Now, Michael Keaton, last thing we need to mention here about Michael Keaton is that he is all set to play he's just got finished, or he's in the middle of playing Batman again. That's right. Michael Keaton has returned as Batman, and people are loving it, because 30 years on, people are starting to really, as I said, going back to like how people feel about Batman 89 all these years later. Batman 89 rests in a really good place right now. No one's like, oh, it's a phony Batman. Me personally, I have never, on one hand, I don't think Michael Keaton is a good Batman Bruce Wayne. I don't. I think I don't think he understands the character. And when people want to argue me blue in the face about this, I just bring up one scene. the scene in Batman 89 where he's Bruce Wayne and he puts a sterling silver tray under his shirt to sort of protect himself from a bullet, which is kind of like a very Batman. That's a very comic book thing for Bruce Wayne Batman to kind of do if he's caught in a pinch without his suit. But then he does this thing that is just pure. He breaks character. He's not Bruce Wayne anymore. He's Michael Keaton. And he goes, "You want to get nuts? Let's get nuts." And I promise you, that is just so something Bruce Wayne would never say. He would never ever say, "You want to get nuts?" He would never act like that. It was just such a, to me, that's what demonstrated that's what showed me like what Tim Burton thought about Batman Bruce Wayne when he allowed that scene to happen. I don't know if that was an improv line or if that's in the script, but it is goofy. It's goofier than, in my opinion, it's goofier than anything we see in Batman and Robin. Probably the single most goofiest moment in all of the Batman Warner Brothers films happens in the first movie when when Bruce Wayne holds up a fire poker to the Joker and says, "Want to get nuts? Let's get nuts." I mean, it is really goofy, man. It is really, really goofy. Slash says, honestly, the comic accuracy of 89 really came from the all-star set of advisors and comic fanatics helping writing production, including Steve Englehart, who wrote some important issues. And listen, there is a lot that they nail on the head. I mean, we're going to, I don't want to spoil it because we're going to go into it right now. We're going to go into it right now. Batman 10 things unique only to Tim Burton's version of the character. Tim Burton's take on Batman is wholly his own. But what about the character did he change from the original DC Comics? Those old enough to remember 1989 were undoubtedly caught up in the massive summer craze that was Batmania, which swept across the nation like a fever. Eccentric and extraordinary director, eccentric and extraordinary are the perfect ways to describe Tim Burton. Brought his own gothic fantasy, yes, so true, own gothic fantasy style to the comic book kingdom. When he directed and unleashed the first iconic Batman film starring the amazing Michael Keaton and the legendary Jack Nicholson. We haven't spoken about Jack Nicholson's Joker, and I think it's great. I think it's really great. I think the best thing that Nolan ever brought to the table with his Batman films altogether is his version of the Joker as well. Heath Ledger's version of the Joker is, and that's what, I said, I'm not a fan of The Dark Knight. I think it's not a good movie, but I've rewatched it multiple times because of Heath Ledger's magnetic magnum performance as the Joker. There's a lot of great Jokers. Cesar Romero is a great Joker. And just like Batman, each one of these guys brings their own great flavor to the Joker character because there's so many different ways you can take the Joker, and every single version we've seen in the films or the TV show has been incredibly valid, I think. Burton would direct the follow-up sequel before passing on the next two, which turned out to be an embarrassment. I mean, not really, because Batman Forever, like, why do people call it an embarrassment? Batman and Robin was an embarrassment, but Batman Forever did incredibly well. Val Kilmer like exploded from Batman Forever, like exploded in stardom. You know what I'm saying? Jim Carrey. Still, his decision to make Batman a frightening and calculating character was a major hit with audiences. I don't think of Batman in either of these films as frightening and calculating. I actually think that Ben Affleck as Batman is far more frightening and calculating than Michael Keaton is. I think Michael Keaton is a kitten in these films. I do, man. I do. But at the same time, there is sort of like this really, like, I have this like incredibly wonderful nostalgic feeling about Michael Keaton coming back to the role 30 years later and playing an aging Bruce Wayne Batman in the Flashpoint movie. I'm all about it. I'm all about it. I love it. I think it's so wonderful. What a wonderful, sort of nod, callback, send up to the original Batman movies, which I do love. I've watched, how many times have I watched the original Batman 89? I love it. I love it. It's phenomenal. It's a phenomenal film. We wouldn't be sitting here talking about it the way that we have if we didn't think it was phenomenal. However, we need to understand it within the context of the comic, of how people have sort of perceived it and reperceived it, and what did Tim Burton bring that was unique to the character. That's what we're doing. So it's right here. It says, okay, so still, his decision to make Batman a frightening and calculating character was a major hit with audiences. Here are 10 things about Tim Burton's vision of the Batman character. I didn't even see, what does this go to? That are totally unique in comparison to other big screen versions. What is this? Oh, okay. It says 10 reasons why Michael Keaton is still the best Bruce Wayne. No way. Totally disagree. All right, so 10 of 10. An awkward Bruce Wayne. Most big screen adaptations of Bruce Wayne, of the Bruce Wayne character, portray him as as narcissistic and or boring. Maybe in Nolan's Batman, maybe not Val Kilmer. Maybe George Clooney. But, I don't blame George Clooney. George Clooney's perfectly fine Batman Bruce Wayne. It was just the way he was directed by Schumacher. And I can't, like I said, I can't fault Schumacher, because Schumacher was at the behest of the studio, who was like trying to sell toys. Schumacher took a lot of crap, and he didn't deserve to at all. He didn't need to take all that crap. Most big screen adaptations of Bruce Wayne, of the Bruce Wayne character, portray him as narcissistic and or boring. This was designed to try and separate him from his alter ego and throw everyone off who might try to form a connection. Was designed to try and separate him from his alter ego and throw anyone who might try to form a connection off the scent. Tim Burton accomplished this feat by using a much different approach. Instead of using the same formula, he made Bruce Wayne out to be an awkward weirdo. Without his wealth, would probably been ignored by most people. The trick was making the audience wonder if his eccentric behavior was the real Bruce Wayne or a clever act. By blurring the lines, it was impossible to tell. I feel like I feel like the writer here is giving Tim Burton and Michael Keaton way more credit for that than maybe they might deserve. Maybe. One of the big problems with Michael Keaton, I hate to say this, because I think, this has nothing to do with his acting ability. And I love Michael Keaton, dude. Dream Team, Multiplicity. He's great in Jackie Brown. So many great Michael Keaton roles. Gung Ho, Mr. Mom. I mean, the dude is a friggin' genius. But his height is working against him. He's really short. When you look at him as Bruce Wayne, he's just too short, man. He's just too short. I just feel like Bruce Wayne needs to be thicker. Kind of like, again, to go back to Ben Affleck, even Val Kilmer. This is where the one area where Val Kilmer kind of loses. The only area where Val Kilmer kind of loses points is that I feel like what keeps Val Kilmer from being the perfect Bruce Wayne, live action Bruce Wayne that we've seen, is his stature. Batman is a big guy, not like hulking in The Dark Knight Returns per se, but he's kind of like he's actually Ben Affleck is like the perfect looking Bruce Wayne, in my opinion. He's thick, THICC, like thick, you know what I mean? Like chunky. I like it. You don't get any of that with Michael Keaton. He just looks like he's just too frail and meek. And yeah, you can go, oh, well, that really throws people off the scent, but like, no, that's not Bruce Wayne, man. I don't know. It's not Bruce Wayne in the comics either. I just don't. That's the one thing that doesn't work for me. Even George Clooney has the Playboy thing down pat, but even his frame he's so slender. They cast these slender guys, and Bruce Wayne is he's built more like a football player, So yeah, I think that this is it's definitely unique to Batman 89. 9 of 10. His suit design. This Batman suit. Now, when Batman 89 came out, everybody loved the suit. But, as time has gone on, people started making fun of the fact that Batman literally can't turn his head. He has to turn his shoulders. And listen, again, I have to hand it to Michael Keaton. What makes Michael Keaton look, when they say clothes make the man, in this case, I would say the clothes make Michael Keaton into Batman, because Michael Keaton with the clothes, with the suit on, looks like Batman. He is absolutely a valid iteration of Batman, and it's phenomenal, man. It's really great. And at the time, people really love the suit, and then people started to make fun of the suit, the fact that he can't turn his head. His movements are very awkward in the suit. He can't really do anything. If you notice, when he kicks with his whole, more in Batman Returns, he has to kick with his whole body. He has to lean his whole body to the side and lift his leg up to kick. You know what I mean? He's got this big, heavy leather cape that weighs him down. It's more, he's more, I don't know, he's more of like, it's more, what's the word I'm trying to think? I'm at a loss for words at the moment. It's more, it doesn't, there's no practicality to the suit that he wears and that Val Kilmer or George Clooney wears. These are suits that are really hard to do stuff. However, and this is again why I love Joel Schumacher. Joel Schumacher finds a way for Batman to fight in his suit, especially in Batman Forever. The fight scenes in Batman Forever are phenomenal. And you really get a feeling for Batman kicking ass for the first time in live action history, truly, in that kind of way. And then Nolan sort of tries to move away from this. He's like, well, I really wanted Christian Bale to be able to turn his head, so I redesigned the Batsuit, and takes away from the mantle one of the things, the shape of Batman in '89 is perfect. It's so iconic. The way that the horns come up and the straight sort of mantle, that sort of it's almost like he's made out of stone in this way, and it does impose a fearful sort of look and menace in that kind of way. But it's not Michael Keaton doing it. It's the suit. Slash says, I miss the new look design with the yellow oval, as impractical as it may be. I love the new look. I like the Batman with just the plain black symbol. However, the yellow oval does serve a purpose. It is a target to draw gunfire away from Batman's head. And this has been explained a bunch of times in the comics. I think it was famously explained firstly by Frank Miller in The Dark Knight Returns, if I'm not mistaken. Batman's suit design in the first two Tim Burton films was supposed to look extremely menacing and aggressive, and it worked. The nature of the getup meant that Batman could swoop down unsuspecting foes and terrorize them enough to tell fish tales in crime-ridden back alleys. And, Tim Burton seems to be obsessed with that in the first 30 minutes of the film, showing Batman coming down on the line, with his, impractically with his cape raised up, trying to create that sort of thing. I mean, it doesn't really feel scary or menacing. It feels, it feels kind of goofy. I don't think we don't really get that aspect in the Schumacher films. That at that point, Batman feels way more like a superhero. In Batman and Batman Returns, Batman does not feel more like a superhero. As a matter of fact, you could take the superhero aspect out of the Burton films altogether, and you just have you have a billionaire who dresses up like a bat and is, kind of like a vigilante. Batman feels more like a vigilante in the first two Batman films. He feels way more like a superhero in Batman Forever and Batman and Robin. You know what I mean? So I don't know. Yeah, Slash says it perfectly. It's funny how he does this epic bat pose only to get shot by a low-level thug 2 seconds later. Now, both Ben Affleck as Batman and Christopher Nolan Batman, I will give them both points in this category because both Snyder and Nolan filmed Batman like a serial killer, especially in Batman Begins. This is the moment of Batman Begins that really, really shines until he opens his mouth and sounds like a friggin' moron. It sounds like an idiot. But before that, see, Kilmer had the best Batman voice. But before that, There's a scene in the warehouse where they first introducing us to Batman in Batman Begins, and Batman sort of swoops down, takes his guys, goes back up on the line. I mean, you really get that mythology, that mythological supernatural sense that Batman's supposed to be creating. And he almost feels like a monster. It's filmed like a monster movie that's slowly taking the people one by one until there was one, that kind of thing. You really get that feeling, and you get that as well in the with Batfleck. You get that in Dawn of Justice, where the two cops, it's a scene actually from The Dark Knight Returns. You get the two cops going into the house, and they see Batman scuttling up a wall, and he doesn't look quite human. He doesn't look quite like a monster. He looks like this weird in-between thing. They really capture that quality very well. That's not apparent at all in the Burton films, in my opinion. That's right, A. Hale. Ever Dance with the Devil in the Pale Moonlight? Phenomenal. See, that's something that's phenomenal that Tim Burton brought, or whoever, the Sam Hamm who wrote the screenplay, brought to the character, or brought to the movie, that whatever, this contribution. I love that. I kind of like that, because they establish. Well, we're going to talk about that in a minute, actually. So let's keep reading. Part of the design included a stiff stationary neck piece that prevented actor Michael Keaton from turning his head from side to side. While it did make Batman look more tough, it 100% did. It also prevented him from accentuating his movements, and I much would have rather had him be able to accentuate his movements. But I guess maybe it was to Michael Keaton's, benefit that he could just look tough, because he doesn't look tough. That's the thing. Michael Keaton doesn't look tough at all. Christopher Nolan poked some good-natured fun at this design when he debuted Batman Begins years later. Yeah, not Batman Begins, when he does The Dark Knight, and it's not good. 8 of 10, the Yellow Bat Insignia. While the overall design of Batman's suit was a huge departure from the previous comic book and TV source material, it wasn't without its flaws. The jet black color was astonishing. And yeah, I mean, before this, Batman, we always think of Batman as being in a gray bodysuit. Batman 89 introduces the jet black Batman, and it's wonderful. It's so perfect. It's so iconic. It takes everything to the next level. It hides, in darkness, it hides certain things that may not work with the human anatomy when trying to make like a Batman-like figure in real life. So bringing the jet black color was astonishing. And it clearly set a dark tone for this particular Batman that mimicked Frank Miller's The Dark Knight source material at the time, 100%. Could not agree more. However, the inclusion of a bright yellow Batman insignia on the front chest was a bit much for a gritty Hollywood take on the comic book source material. I couldn't disagree more. That's such bullshit. It's hard to imagine criminals talking about a giant killer bats wiping out Gotham's criminals after seeing what is essentially the golden arches of superhero iconography. But like we said, if anybody who reads Batman knows that this is to draw gunfire away from Batman's face and onto his chest. It's a target. It has a practical purpose. And I don't think it takes away from that mythology at all, especially if, like Slash says, where he's doing the epic bat pose in 1 second. That's what people are going to remember. They're going to see a flash of yellow. They're not going to be like, and he had a the equivalent of the Golden Arches logo on his chest, Slash says it was designed in color like the comics, but Kane convinced them to make it colorless. Looked great. 100%. I like both. Listen, I like both. I prefer the one without the color because I think it looks cooler, but the yellow serves a practical purpose and has become quite canon in both comic and non-comic form. And I'm okay with it. Especially, I think the animated series really sort of normalized the yellow in the Batman symbol. 7 out of 10. Wait, we already had, 7 out of 10. His Batmobile. This, by far, of all the things that we can really give Burton credit for, it is this Batmobile. This is the coolest Batmobile. It follows the tradition of Batman 66 and the comics, but really Batman 66, where people really, that was the first time that people really latched on to the concept of the Batmobile being this really important piece of iconography. I can't say that word. Iconography. Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. Iconography. It was a really important piece of iconography to Batman as a whole, and it was taken to a whole new level with this Batmobile, which has a nipple at the very end of it, but it looks really cool in Batman 89. It's such a great car, and it's made a comeback in the new movie, whatever new thing is coming out. They have this Batmobile again. It's awesome. Makes me so happy to hear that. It's safe to say that no other cinematic Batmobile can hold a candle to the Tim Burton original. Couldn't agree more. It threw the dated concept of the 60s TV Batmobile out the window in favor of a menacing hot rod built on top of an afterburner. The result was a stunning character unto itself. It really is. The Batmobile is its own character. And in fact, in lieu of Robin, the Batmobile is Batman's sidekick. It drove audiences wild with this animalistic design, while Nolan's Tumbler reinvented the Batmobile for a modern audience. Fuck the Tumbler. The Burton-mobile wins out in the styling department 1,000,000,000%. It's a mini weapon of mass destruction on wheels with protective shielding and a weapons catch that would make the U.S. Army jealous. More than 30 years later, it is still the Gotham Road King. Now, this is where we, for the first time, again, if you're an avid reader of Batman, and you're revisiting Batman from when you're a little kid, but now you've read a bunch of Batman comics like I did, and I'm going, wait a minute, why does Batman have chain guns inside of the Batmobile? Why is he's killing people? He's got bombs that he's exploding. He's demolishing factories that probably caved in. He's like killing lots of people. Batman doesn't kill people. This is the most inaccurate Batman ever, and this is where we have to like sort of respect Tim Burton's vision, that he is deviating from the source material. Of course, no one's ever going to get it perfectly right. There are a bunch of adaptations that come incredibly close, but none of them are going to be pitch perfect. And in this version, this Batman doesn't have any problem killing people. We just got to accept it and appreciate it for what it is. And I do. Now I do. There was a long time where I didn't, and I couldn't accept it, because, like I said, core concept of Batman, as we've come to know him as the modern Batman, not the original Batman, because like we said, he used guns. The original Batman used guns. But Batman doesn't use guns, and he doesn't take a life. And this really got amped up, and once again, that's why I was talking about The Dark Knight Returns is such like a pivotal moment for this character's history, because this is when the character is reinvented, and suddenly, lines like, "We don't use guns; they're clumsy." What does he say when he's talking to the Bat gang? "We don't use guns; they're clumsy," and he breaks the gun in half. "Our weapons are silent," and he's talking about his ninja batarang sort of dealies. There's such like an element of honor in that he doesn't use guns or traditional guns. He does use guns. He does brandish a gun in The Dark Knight Returns, but it's a gun with a grappling hook that allows him to sort of go from building to building. Number 6, revealing his identity to an enemy. I mean, this is also a big no-no in most Batman comic book literature. There are exceptions to the rule, one being Ra's al Ghul, the Demon's Head, who we do see in Batman Begins. He does know Bruce Wayne's identity. He deducts it or figures it out. I forget how he finds out. But the thing about Ra's is he's a man of honor, even though he is, essentially wants to genocide the planet. Noble intentions, wants to preserve the earth, but wants to commit mass genocide, which is a big no-no. I would think we would all agree. But he respects the detective. He calls him the detective. He's really great. He's really well done in the animated series. And he has a daughter, Talia. Bruce Wayne has a son with Talia named Damian. This was originally not canon, though. that it was later made canon. It was from a one-off book called Son of the Demon, where it was implied that Batman had a son with Talia. But more recently, Damian, who's like a deadly homicidal little kid, which is awesome, has become full-on canon, and he is the new Robin. I think it's awesome, and I hope it never goes away. There was I think that was really starting to be established. There was an issue called Batman 666. There was way before oh no, it was Batman 666, and it was in the future, and Damian was now Batman, and yada yada yada, whatever. Why were we talking about all that? Oh, because Ra's al Ghul knows Batman's identity. So revealing his identity to an enemy. And one of the big goofy aspects about the Warner Brothers Batman films is that the masks that they designed, they all have these big eye holes, rightfully so, for comfort. And then they would there would be dark eyeshadow paint around the eyes to sort of finish the mask. And it's kind of comedic in this scene that we're seeing right here in Batman Returns, where he reveals his identity to Selina, to show her, well, she already knew his identity because they figured it out, because it was the same sort of hook as Dance with the Devil in the Pale Moonlight. That's how in that same scene where he talks about wanting to go nuts, he asks the question that he asked to all his victims, the Joker does, have you ever danced with the devil in the pale moonlight? And Bruce Wayne remembers that that's what the murderer of his parents said when he was a little boy. See you around, kid. Like walks away, Jack Napier. And he makes the connection that Joker is the man that murdered his parents, which is a really cool sort of, trying to keep the story closed off, Batman as a singular film. Like if you never have anything after Batman, there's no continuing thing. And the films really don't continue. Even Batman Returns is a very separate story from Batman. All the films are contained, very well contained. But Batman in particular is a perfectly well-contained film in that, like, it starts with the murder of his parents, and he finds the murderer and gets his revenge, and now he's just Batman, and he stares up at the signal, the end. That's the story of the Batman, as opposed to Batman. And it's really great. And in Batman Returns, Selina Kyle, Catwoman, wonderfully played by Michelle Pfeiffer. Some of the best casting in all of comic book films is Michelle Pfeiffer as Selina Kyle, Catwoman. And they have this little, she says something about like mistletoe is deadly, but only if you eat it. And that's how they realize when they're dancing with each other to Susie and the Banshee song, that they are, that she is Catwoman, that he is actually Batman. So at this point, he has no problem revealing his identity by ripping off his mask, which goes from being Kevlar to rubber in 2.5 seconds. Kind of hilarious. The key to Batman's success is his ability to keep his secret identity safe while pounding criminals into the dirt every night. The last thing he would want to do is jeopardize that by revealing his face to the world. Yet he does that exactly in Batman Returns when he tries to talk Selina Kyle down from murdering the villainous Max Schreck. See, now what the article has wrong is what I just said. They figure out who each other are when Penguin crashes Max Schreck's ball. Max Schreck being named after the actor from the 1921 German expressionist Nosferatu film, who plays Count Orlok as Max Schreck, a villain that is repurposed into Batman Returns that's not in any comic books. See, because that's the thing too. Tim Burton, and this is where Batman Returns really suffers. Tim Burton is almost more obsessed. He's kind of interested in Batman in Batman 89, but he becomes super obsessed with Batman's rogues gallery in Batman Returns. Batman is like a third-rate character. He's like a secondary character to the Penguin and Catwoman, and of course he had to have one more villain, Max Schreck. He just wanted Christopher Walken to be this weirdo who runs this corporation. And this is where the Batman Returns should really be called the Penguin and the Cat, or the Penguin and the Cat with a little bit of Bat. You know what I mean? Because Batman is just he's so in the back, he's so backseat to these characters. Nothing is explored. with the character in Batman Returns? Really nothing, apart from a rehashing of how he can't really be in romantically involved with everyone because of his secret life. You know what I mean? The story is really about the pathos and the tragedy of Penguin and struggling with like who or what he is. It's just funny. And this is where Tim Burton, he gets caught up in the sensationalism and the stylization of certain aspects and forgets about story altogether because he just wants to. He's like, I really want a scene where Penguin has helicopter blades coming out of his umbrella, which is very true to the comic. And I want, and I need a scene where Batman is going to glide down around a Christmas tree. I'm sure you probably have some suits who are like, listen, we want you to make sure we get some toys made too. And, yada, yada, yada. I don't know. 5. Sorry. Without missing a beat, Bruce tears off his headpiece to reveal the man underneath. While Shrek doesn't appear too convinced that he's the genuine article, it would have been a folly to show his face in front of such a person. Either Bruce was ready to call it quits on the Cape Crusader biz, or he wasn't thinking straight. That is true, because he wasn't expecting Max Shrek to be killed in that moment. It was very un-Batman-like of him to show his face to Max Shrek, especially a guy like Max Shrek. So it is maybe because he thought he was going to go to jail. I don't know. He does say that, I think, at one point. So, 5, political entanglements. Nolan's version of Bruce Wayne was only mildly involved in Gotham City's politics. I would argue the opposite. I would say not at all, man. Nolan's version he was involved with like the municipal works, like this big train. Wayne Enterprises is building this big train that goes around, Gotham City, or at least is something that his father put together. And then also, what about the tactical division, the aren't to explain all the gadgets, that sort of stuff, and they probably have military contracts or going to like he has to like extradite some guy from outside the country in Singapore or Shanghai or somewhere. I don't even know, some country in the South Pacific. He's all over the place. He's all over the place. So I don't know if we can really say it's singular to Burton's version. Nolan's version of Bruce Wayne was only mildly involved in Gotham City's politics and preferred to pull strings with subtlety from behind his desk. This usually took the form of campaign contributions to individuals like Harvey Dent. Oh yeah, I didn't even think about the Harvey Dent connection too. I mean, come on, Harvey, you're my white knight. Harvey, you're my white knight. Who he thought could make a real difference in turning the city around. In so much so, and this was a huge problem with me with Batman, with the Dark Knight, Nolan's The Dark Knight. The moment that Bruce Wayne discovers Harvey Dent with a gun to someone's head, ready to murder them, that's the moment that you cross the line with Batman. The moment that you like break the law in that kind of way, you are no longer one of the good guys. You are compromised. Batman would think you are compromised and can't be trusted and yada, yada, yada. And the fact that he enables Harvey Dent to continue to unravel the way he does because he believes in Harvey Dent, the White Knight, I never, ever bought that. It never, ever clicked or jived with me, and I always thought it was bullshit. And it was another thing that really turned me off to the Dark Knight. You're going to see me swatting a lot of flies away because I am in the Middle East right now, and it is dry, hot desert summer, and the flies are out like vultures, man, and they are the worst. And it's one of the worst parts about being outside, if I'm being honest, sometimes. That's why I like doing the show early in the morning, because it's very cool and the sun rises and the flies aren't out yet. So yeah, so I think it is malarkey, man. Such malarkey that that's malarkey. The Harvey Dent thing, who he thought he could make a real difference in turning the city around. Not at that point. In Burton's Batman films, Wayne is much more politically involved. He actively hobnobs with city elite. Well, he does. There's like that fundraiser thing in the beginning at Wayne's mansion. Okay. Specifically the mayor. Okay. In the second film, Wayne openly confronts Max Schreck about the Penguin running the Red Triangle Circus Gang and vows to work with the mayor to defeat his political run, because the Penguin is running for the mayor, which I thought that's a brilliant idea for a comic book movie. That's great. That works. Like that part of the story works really well, but that's not Bruce Wayne Batman story. He literally has no story in this film. The story belongs to the Penguin, which is kind of ridiculous to an extent. But then again, a lot of people will tell you one of the things, and we haven't talked about this at all, but one of the things that makes Batman so great for a lot of people is his rogues gallery. The rogues gallery is what makes Batman stand out, even more than he might, because he is the best rogues gallery. There's such interesting characters, more than any other superhero in DC or Marvel, I would say. Definitely in DC. Premier. When people think about DC supervillains, they think about Batman's rogues gallery. And they don't even mention he doesn't even mention the fact that, when he's in this article, they're not even talking about the fact that Max Schreck wants to suck power out of Gotham City. I mean, isn't that kind of political a little bit? Like, in that he's petitioning the mayor and trying to get permits cleared so he can build this giant power station that doesn't give power to Gotham, but takes power and charges people and makes money somehow. I don't know. For it, his relationship with Commissioner Gordon. Now, what's interesting about Pat Hingle, who plays Commissioner Gordon, and you'll notice, I didn't notice this until much later in life, that Pat Hingle is missing his pinky finger, and it's right there. It's very jarring when you look and you're like, oh, he's missing his finger. Something that I just never realized, didn't know until I was revisiting the Warner Brothers films one day. Besides Pat Hingle, Michael Gough, who plays Alfred, these are the only two actors that are in all four films. This is the only connective tissue that we have through all four movies. So they kind of do hold this sort of symbolically important sort of connective tissue that allows us to think about the Warner Brothers films as like a cohesive whole, because Batman changes faces 3 times, The relationship between Batman and Commissioner Gordon cannot be overstated. This is something that Nolan did really well. He really, really nailed Commissioner Gordon, and he gave Commissioner Gordon so much to do. Maybe I'm too hard on Nolan. There's a lot of things I don't like about Nolan, but there's some things that he really nails really, really well. And one of them is Commissioner Gordon and Commissioner Gordon's partnership with Batman. In the Nolan movies, mwah. But in the Batman movies, he's just like a background character. The relationship between Batman and Commissioner Gordon cannot be overstated. It's one of the linchpins in keeping the balance between vigilantism and policing in check. So true. And especially, oh my God, their relationship goes to new levels during Batman No Man's Land in 1999, 2000, 2001, when there's an earthquake that turns Gotham City into a no man's land, and all the Batman's rogues sort of take over and parts of Gotham City, and they have their own gangs, and it basically becomes like a post-apocalyptic landscape. They kind of did a little bit of this in the third Batman, The Dark Knight Rises. They kind of do a little bit of no man's land there. But Commissioner Gordon is so essential in this series, and it's awesome to see his partnership with Batman in full swing. It's wonderful. And the same can be said for The Long Halloween, which is where Nolan got some of his inspiration. That's the source material that he looked at. I'm being told that The Long Halloween is being adapted finally, and I can't wait, because Jeff Loeb is one of the best Batman writers out there. I mean, the dude is so he's a poet when it comes to writing Batman. Check out his work with Batman. Haunted Night, Dark Victory, which is a sequel to The Long Halloween. Great stuff. Great stuff. Nolan's films pull Batman much closer to Gordon than had previously been seen before in the movies. Burton's Batman was more detached from the Commissioner, very much so. And they have one scene together in Batman Returns. It's like, oh, we got to get that obligatory Commissioner Gordon scene. So put it at the beginning with the Red Triangle Gang. The two rarely spoke or shared any on-screen time together. In fact, the first film spent its entire running length of the two at odds. Well, right, because he reads the note at the end, Commissioner Gordon, from Batman with the bat signal. While the second film showed Batman as something of a lone wolf who the commissioner calls out as extra muscle. Yeah, and again, that's as an adaptation, that's valid. That's totally valid. Like, fine. By the once again, I'm gonna take another moment to just say, if you are new to this channel, please take a moment and subscribe, like, share, comment, yada yada yada. Great way to support the channel. Thank you so much for being here. 3, his butler. Alfred Pennyworth has kept the Cape Crusader going. That much is certain. Without his attentiveness and support, it's doubtful Bruce Wayne would have lived nearly as long as he did. Very true. Well, Alfred, I mean, and also Alfred is like the closest thing that he has to, a family, father and a mother. Well, Alfred does have quite a colorful history of his own. That's right. He used to be in like a Secret Service in England. He has his own series now on Netflix. It's called Pennyworth. He's portrayed very low key in Burton's films. I really like what Snyder did with him. Sort of really took him into the Robin role. Like, he really feels more like a sidekick in the Snyderverse, where he's younger, he's more tech savvy. It's like they tried to fuse Lucius Fox with a little bit of Robin and a whole lot of Alfred in Jeremy Irons' portrayal in the Snyderverse movies. And I like it. I liked it a lot. But yes, he is very low key. He's very old. He's very old. I mean, he's an old Hammer. I think he was in a lot of Hammer films. And he's in a lot of Burton movies. You could see Michael Gough turn up a whole bunch. This version of Alfred is much more the traditional butler type, complete with a distinguished high society accent and mannerisms to match. He is not a grizzled analyst like Nolan's version of the character. Yeah, Michael Caine was pretty good as Alfred. He was a pretty great Alfred too. It's almost like Nolan was real. New take here, or new realization as we're doing this. Nolan was really good with a lot of the supporting characters in the Batman universe, much more so than he was with Batman, I would say. He really, really nailed Lucius Fox. Great. Like, I was really happy with Lucius Fox. Michael Caine as Alfred was pretty great. Even Liam Neeson as Ra's al Ghul was pretty great. Cillian Murphy was pretty good as the Scarecrow. It really falters. Everything really falters with Harvey Dent and with Christian Bale. Truly. Even Bane is kind of interesting, even though it's kind of weird. But it was a very weird choice to do this with Bane. I wish that he could have used like a luchador mask, so that what's his face, Tom Hardy, could have been more expressive with his face, underneath this gas mask sort of situation. They don't really. It's interesting. Bane is really charismatic. The best thing about The Dark Knight Rises, the only good thing about The Dark Knight Rises, truly, Bane is really charismatic, but he's sort of executed poorly at the same time from like a production design aspect. You know what I mean? Character-wise, not so much. Character-wise, he's very interesting. I'm down. I'm down with that part of Bane. So he's not a grizzled analyst like Nolan's version of the character, nor is he actively involved. Nor is he as actively involved as the version seen in Batman versus Superman. Instead, he straddles the fence between both worlds in a pleasant and charming manner. I agree. I've always loved Michael Gough's Pennyworth, even though he's a little bit old. He's a little bit too old. He does a wonderful job assisting Batman when they sabotage the Penguin's mayoral campaign, and they hijack he's there in the Batcave, which is another great aspect we haven't spoken about. The Batcave is great in Keaton's cave is great, but he's there working the machinery to help Batman sabotage the Penguin with recordings that they made. It's great. Love it. Two, his parents kill her. We talked about this briefly, and I think it's great. And this is great casting for a young Nicholson. This one's no mystery for comic book fans who know Batman's backstory, but it's a bit of a shock when the source material was adapted for the 1989 film. Here, and this was Burton's idea. Here, Burton decided to kill two birds with one stone by making the primary antagonist the dark inspiration for Batman's personal vendetta. And I mean, it works. It works so well. I have no issue with this. Fine. That's totally fine with me. Batman is a revenger. He does get revenge. They talk a lot about revenge in Batman Forever. One of the overarching themes is Batman is Val Kilmer's Bruce Wayne trying to get Chris O'Donnell's Dick Grayson, and that's another thing. Oh my God, Dick Grayson in friggin' Batman Forever is phenomenal. Trying to keep him from exacting revenge on Harvey Dent, on Two-Face. Probably the goofiest aspect, really. Well, I mean, you could say that the Riddler is pretty goofy too. I've heard a lot of people say like that they just cannot get over how Harvey Dent is portrayed in Batman Forever. It works. It's the 90s. It's 1995. It works for 1995. Whatever. Yes, it's goofy. That's probably the worst character portrayal of all in that whole series, in that movie particularly, is Harvey Dent is just so goofy. He's so goofy. He's so over the top. That's not Harvey Dent. Harvey Dent is a cold-blooded, serious, calculating killer who is super unpredictable because of his coin. And we don't see that as much in Batman Forever. There's my first criticism of Batman Forever, truly. Jack Napier, aka the Joker, was responsible for the murder of Wayne's parents when he was a child. This gave Bruce Wayne an extra personal reason to take down the clown prince of crime, besides the fact that he wanted to off 3/4 of Gotham's population with Smilex gas. And people forget, like, the plot is a very good comic book plot. The Joker uses his Smilex gas to poison various household products. He's just terrorizing the city. What he's doing is no different from what the Joker is doing in The Dark Knight. They're very, very similar. People sort of give a lot of credit to what Heath Ledger's motivations in that film, and it's just not the case. You know what I mean? Killing through revenge. It could be argued that the Dark Knight's entire crusade against crime is a form of revenge for the death of his parents. Yes, partially, but this particular version went far beyond. When Bruce Wayne learned that Jack Napier was the villain responsible, it changed their dynamic entirely. Batman rained down death and destruction on the Joker's crew before trying to take him down directly. Even just hearing that, when you think about it, like, take the DC Comics aspect completely out of Batman 89, Tim Burton's Batman 89, and think about, this is just a film about a vigilante that dresses up as a bat, exacting revenge on this clown prince of crime who killed his millionaire parents. And it just sort of like, it's like this dark revenge, Shakespearean pathos type story that totally works as a self-contained film. And that's why it still holds up even to this day. And all of those things that I just said are perfectly valid within the Batman mythos from that 1939 time, like we said over and over again during this episode. So it all works. It all works. Eventually, this led to a mismatched beatdown at the top of the church's bell tower in the final act, and it's so great. It turns into the hero climbing the tower to rescue the damsel from the monster in the Gothic church. Like, it's wonderful. What a wonderful, these wonderful archetypical, I can't talk. These wonderful archetypes within the storytelling, these broad strokes that sort of transcend the comic book anchors of Batman and sort of make it this thing that's outside of Batman in the same way that Jean Cocteau's Le Belle Le Bête, Beauty and the Beast, is the true French universal horror monster film, right? If you think about it, Beauty and the Beast is truly, in general, the story of Beauty and the Beast is the first universal monster story, way before Frankenstein, way before Dracula, a fairy tale that goes back to the 16 or 1700s in France, right? And so in that kind of way, that's what we're kind of seeing in Batman. It's like this stuff that you might find in maybe a film from the 1920s and the 1930s, maybe a noir film. There's a lot of noir in Batman. It's almost like a comic book noir, if you think about it. And, look no further than the gorgeous, brilliant production design. For me, I like Schumacher's Gotham City, but I like Tim Burton's Gotham City a whole lot more. It feels way more like the comic book. It's funny, they're both solid comic book adaptations of Gotham City. I've always hated Nolan's version of Gotham City, and Snyder's version is not great either. In those two more modern cinematic adaptations of Batman, it doesn't feel like Gotham City at all. Schumacher and Burton nailed them perfectly. Schumacher's had more color. Burton's was just drenched in darkness. Burton's was noir, and Schumacher's was theatrical, if that makes any sense. And they both work. This vengeful attitude would be revisited later in Batman versus Superman's interpretation of the character. Burton's version kept the killing long after the Joker was down and out. True, because he does the same thing. And then, then there's one more thing I want to look at real quick. Let's just see, since we're here, since we like to be thorough here, if you bear with me one more second, I found this other article. Top 10 Bruce Wayne as Batman. No, sorry. Wait, what? Oh, here it is. Bruce Wayne. Wait, what? There's two top 10 articles that I realized that we have. Okay, so there's this one real quick. Let's just look at this real quick. We're not going to read the whole thing. He nailed Batman's duality. These are things that Batman, 10 reasons why Michael Keaton is still the best Bruce Wayne. He nailed Batman's duality. No, he did not. Man, maybe a little bit. He seemed uncomfortable as Bruce Wayne, posing as a carefree billionaire in the public eye, and in his element as Batman. That's true. Brazenly terrifying goons with an icy stare. On top of that, the Bruce facade broke down when he was around Vicky Vale and he could be his true self. He improvised a lot of his best lines. So is the nuts line, for example, in the dinner scene between Bruce and Vicky, Keaton improvised line, I don't think I've ever been in this room before. Well, that's great. I mean, that's a very Bruce Wayne. That's a good Bruce Wayne line. I'll give him credit for that. He was casual, not aggressive. A lot of modern portrayals of the Cape Crusader, like the versions played by Christian Bale and Ben Affleck, seem to have an aggression off to see who could be the angriest Batman. But Michael Keaton went the other way with his performance. The anguish and inner turmoil showed through Keaton's portrayal of Bruce Wayne. While he was Batman, he was cool and casual. That's true. He was kind of cool and casual. He was more comfortable wearing the cowl than the tuxedo. Nah, I don't know about that. He was cool and casual as Batman in certain scenes. I'll give that. He invented the Batman voice. Okay, I will say this. There is a lot of great Batman voice that Michael Keaton does as Bruce Wayne. All right, I have to give him that. Every actor that plays Batman has to work out their Batman voice. This was actually invented by Michael Keaton. Before Keaton, the actors who played Batman used the same voice to play Bruce Wayne. But Keaton didn't believe it was realistic, that no one could tell it was billionaire socialite Bruce Wayne under the cowl. I mean, I haven't watched the movie in a while. I'd have to really go back and take a look. But yeah, I'd say, yeah, that's pretty good too. I'm being overtaken by this article and convinced otherwise of what I came here to say. He had the best Batman voice. He invented the Batman voice. He had the best Batman voice. This is what 100% disagree here. I give that to Val Kilmer, man. Val Kilmer's Batman voice is phenomenal, and Kevin Conroy, who is a voice actor, is Batman to me. When I read Batman comics, I think of Kevin Conroy's voice and Kevin Conroy's voice alone. He defied over 50,000 naysayers. There's a long-standing tradition of Batman fans have no faith in the actors that get cast in the movie adaptations of the comics and end up eating their words when those actors give fantastic performances. That's true. Fans complained about Heath Ledger being cast as the Joker, and it resulted in an Oscar-winning portrayal of one of the greatest villains in movie history. I don't know if he would have won that Oscar if he hadn't died, but I will say it is one of the greatest portrayal of a villain in movie history for sure. So maybe it would have been, he definitely would have been nominated. I don't know if he would have necessarily won, because fuck the Academy. What are the Academy? They don't know shit. That tradition started when Michael Keaton was cast as Batman, and the offices of Warner Brothers were flooded with 50,000 protest letters. But that's been going on forever in the age of the internet. This was not. I mean, this was something. Maybe it was new at the time, but there have been a lot of naysayers. There have been way more naysayers than that. That doesn't make Michael Keaton a good Batman, in my opinion. He had great chemistry with the actors playing his villains. So. Maybe with Jack Nicholson as the Joker, a little bit. I'd say more than anything, his chemistry with Michelle Pfeiffer as Catwoman definitely was on the ball. Definitely was on the ball. A little less so with the Penguin. In the age of MCU cookie cutter villains coming and going without making an impact on the hero or the audience, that shouldn't be taken for granted. I think this is no, this is bullshit, man. No way, man. He didn't have that. His chemistry was okay. Wasn't that great. Wasn't that, they're giving him too much credit. He brought a sense of humor to the role. This is true. He did bring a sense of humor to the role. He was a comedian. Michael Keaton comes from a comedic world. And again, ad-libbing a line like I've never even been in this room before that's a great Bruce Wayne aloof kind of line. Want to get nuts is not, there's someone did a meme of the Joker and Batman and Bruce Wayne, Michael Keaton's Bruce Wayne, walking away from like a nut stand saying, I'm really glad we got nuts, because we want to get nuts. Let's get nuts. And they got nuts. He's like, I'm really glad we did this. It's really funny. He had a close working relationship with Tim Burton. That doesn't matter. They worked on 3 films together, but that doesn't matter to me. Having already worked together on Beetlejuice, Michael Keaton and Tim Burton had established a working relationship prior to collaborating on the 2 Batman movies, and that relationship only got stronger when they were working on the films. I think, like I said, Val Kilmer and Joel Schumacher worked together once, and they did a phenomenal job. I don't think that should count for anything. He humanized Bruce Wayne. I think Val Kilmer humanized Bruce Wayne way more than Michael Keaton did. Or just as much, maybe, just as much. The most important quality that Michael Keaton brought to Bruce Wayne was making him feel like a real person. Given that he's a genius billionaire, they're giving him too much credit, man. Given that he's a genius billionaire vigilante, it can be hard for an actor to make Bruce relatable, but Keaton managed it. He brought a real humanity to Bruce that's hardly ever seen on. I mean, everybody today goes on and on about how Michael Keaton is still the best on-screen Batman. And I feel like people just say that because it's like the thing to say. You know what I mean? Like they don't actually believe it. They just say it because it's like the thing to say, So yeah, that concludes the stream for today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you like this content, please consider signing up for the Patreon, or buying a cup of coffee. And more than anything, please make sure to subscribe, like, comment, leave a share. Should we go to the sponsored outro? Let's see if it'll let us. Let's see if the Wi-Fi is going to let us do it. It may not. It's difficult. It's difficult. Let's see. Oh my God. Did they take away my videos? Where are my videos? Oh, there they are. Hey guys, what's going on? Let's try it. It's not working.
Hey guys, what's going on? Hey guys, what's going on? It's Jeff. So I've decided.
Do it.
Hey guys, what's going on? Hey guys,
It's not.
hey guys, what's going on? It's Jeff. So I've decided to make a Patreon. What is Patreon? I don't know how to define a Patreon. Let me look it up. Patreon is a membership platform that makes it very easy for creators to get paid for the things that they're already creating. I want to do it full time. I want this to be my full-time job. In my efforts to make that happen, I've set up this platform. Is it going to work? Is it going to be successful? I don't know, but I would rather try and crash and burn than not try at all. The goal is to create enough passive revenue so that I can continue to do this full-time, uninterrupted. Why? Because I love to do this. I love creating content. I love making videos. I love shooting films. I love doing podcasts. In case you couldn't tell, I love to talk and I never shut the fuck up. So right now I've kept the Patreon incredibly simple. There's 2 tiers, and that may change in the future. The Murdergram is a simple way to extend support for all of the hours and hours of free content on the channel for nothing more than $1. 38 cents goes to Patreon. What's $1.38, eh? It's less than a cup of coffee, but it's a great way that you can show support for very little effort. When you divide that $1.38 by the hours and hours and hours of time spent listening to this endless drivel of content, the dollar cost average works out. Next up is the YouTube casualty for $6.66. The YouTube casualty is loaded to the gills. Enjoy the archive ad-free, as well as ad-free early access to special docu-style podcast videos, music reaction commentaries, and the like, a month before they drop on YouTube, loaded with ads, I might add. You're also going to get exclusive content and behind-the-scenes content that is not available on YouTube or anywhere else. So you get to peek behind the veil. And believe me, there's a couple of choice pieces. Most of all, more than anything, whether you join the Patreon or not, I just want to thank each and every one of you that comes to the channel, that watches all the shows, that leaves comments, that participates, that subscribes. That's really the most important thing. This is just trying to find a way to earn a living as an artist. And with that, thank you for my TED Talk. Join the Patreon because we need you!
66 cents.
Have a wonderful day, everybody. Cheers.